Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear Leak Project, how the heck are you? We have the man, the legend, the way of life, Gill Broussard with us. Really excited to speak with him. He's been on the show a few times before. Always a treasure trove of data, a plethora of information. And we're going to talk about the infamous Planet 7X that he sees as a possible threat in the future, connected to, or I shouldn't say connected to, what the difference is. Let me rephrase this. What's the difference between 7X and Planet 9 and many of these trans-Neptunian objects and Kuiper Belt objects? That's what we are going to discuss today. He has orbits and charts that he's going to share with us. And if we have time towards the end of the podcast, we might even get into Revelation and the New Jerusalem that descends from heaven and his analysis on it. So really excited, Gill. Thanks a lot for joining us here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Well, thank you, Rex, for having me. And I've been doing well lately.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, like I said, every time you come on the show, the audience that listens to the podcast, they really enjoy the information. I really enjoy the information. You bring something different to the table every time. So if we could, let's just jump right in. Let's look at this chart that you shared with me. And I'm going to pull it up on the screen now so that we can kind of look at the differences between many of these Kuiper Belt objects and trans-Neptunian objects that have been discovered and talked about. Because I even asked you, I said, is Planet 9 and Planet 7X the same? Well, we're going to look at the data right now. So let me just pull this up real quick. Here we go. All right. And I'm going to give you the microphone now.
All right. This is the orbital path on what's been published. Maybe some of your viewers, or you able to see my mouse pointing to something? You able to see me pointing? You can't. Okay. In the top middle section of the drawing, you see a zoomed in area of our known solar system. Brings us all the way up out to Pluto. Well, you shrink it down into the middle of this other drawing, and that shows you the size of our known solar system in comparison to these other objects that they're talking about. Now, to Neptune, you're talking about 30 astronomical units. One astronomical unit is roughly 93 million miles. That's the distance between the sun and Earth. And for you to reach Neptune takes roughly 30 astronomical units. Well, this Planet 9 that they're talking about is roughly around 300 astronomical units. It's way out there. And I can quote one of the scientists in one of his videos. He says it would have no effect to Earth. And that's true. It's too far out to have an effect on us. So the data that I've come across over the last 5 years of doing research, the Asian records, the biblical records, where they sent the Pioneer and Voyager probe, is where this blue circle, this elliptical shape I have drawn in the center, that is roughly about 94 astronomical units out, and that's about 3 times further than Neptune, and that's roughly gives you roughly about 360-year orbit, approximately.
Okay.
That's what it's been the average, kind of, if you want to average out the differences between the different orbits that came in that, it varies by a few years or so.
It's fascinating because I've been doing a lot of research into these discoveries, these trans-Neptunian objects and these Kuiper Belt objects. And I love how they give them model numbers. They're like, this is model number 52-X4. And people are like, oh, is that some type of new smartphone? Is that a new car? Is that a new, like a sports car or something? And they're planets. And it's amazing how they're finding all these new discoveries. And it went from, a solar system of 9, maybe 10 planets, like the 10th planet that's been talked about for so long. And now people are saying, wow, there's dozens of planets that have been discovered to orbit around our sun. And they have these very weird, strange orbits, many of them. But one thing that I find fascinating that you just said that really is making me think more now about, wow, you could be right. When you said that something that far out, like Planet 9, wouldn't have as much effect as they say it's having right now. And the size of it's huge. It's massive. But that makes me wonder, okay, how could, like you just said, Jupiter, it's about the size of Jupiter, right? So something the size of Jupiter isn't affecting us.
They're actually talking about it being multiple times larger than Jupiter. They said 4 to 5 times is what they're quoting. And they're the ones that said it would have nil effect. Now, they stopped saying that in their more recent videos. But if you look at the first few videos, they said it had nil effect. I mean, zero, completely none, absolutely none whatsoever. So the perturbations that we've been seeing for the last almost 2 centuries is not caused by this object that's called Planet 9. It has to be another object, and the data that I found does not line up with this Planet 9 at all, because you can see it does not cross Earth's path. Earth is the third rock from the sun there. Okay. The orbit of Planet 9 does not come inside any of our known planets within our present solar system. It cannot be a threat. It has no influence. It has not been seen by the ancients of old. It's too far out. It hasn't even been seen by modern astronomers yet, because I seriously doubt if there's a telescope that can see that far, actually. Unless it's in some sort of close approach scenario. Matter of fact, they can't see planet 7X at its furthest orbit. So I'm pretty sure they can't see this other one. There is a limitation to our present equipment. And so I don't see what sort of instruments they're using, even infrared. Sure, there are advancements, but as far as I know, they haven't reached this level yet.
So you're saying let me ask a question real quick. You're saying it's 3 times as far out as Neptune right now?
No, Planet 7X is.
Yeah. Okay. So
the other one is like 22 times further.
Right. Planet 9 is way, way out there.
Right. If you look at when the Vatican was taking a look at it, and then when they went silent about it, it kind of tells us what the limits were at the time of what they were looking at. Because if the Vatican could have seen it, Vatican came online roughly right after NASA went silent in 1992. Okay. December 1992, that's when NASA went quiet on this object. There was no more talk about Planet 7X. And that's when if you take the software, we have the existing path where Pioneer and Voyager probes went. And you turn them on, and you see where they were on December 1992. Well, they're at the edge about 10, 15 years outside Neptune's orbit, in this direction that I have drawn right here in the blue. All of the data, not just the NASA probes, but the Asian records, the biblical records, all point to the southern universe. Southern universe is the way I have it drawn right here. South of the universe is not where polar south is. That's called Nadar. Whenever you hear people read a technical paper and they're not technically inclined, and they're saying the technical paper said it's coming from the southern universe, and they're taking data and they're pointing to the South Pole, that's the wrong reference point. South of the universe is like a flat plane. If you draw a line between the sun, in the center of the sun to the center of the earth, and let it go out into space, you draw 4 cardinal points on that: north, south, east, and west. It's on a flat plane. Going where polar north is, that's called zenith. Polar south is called nadir. So some of these YouTubers can't even point in the right direction after reading a scientific paper. South of the universe is where this blue, elliptical path here that I have drawn, and that's where all these other items are coming at it from different angles. This happens to be right in the center of it, which I find it quite unique. And from that direction, this is where most of our planets get the most severe perturbations from our orbit. Now, keep in mind that the model has changed. There's 2 camps of thought. There are the astronomy camp that believes that the universe is ruled by gravity and that there's missing matter. And they created the term dark energy and dark matter. The physicists claim, not claim, now it's been proven, that the ruling force in the universe is electromagnetic and that gravity is the weaker force. Well, they are more correct in their model than the astronomy group. And that was proven within the last few years when comet Siding Springs passed by Mars. You had an electrical discharge from the tail of a comet over the planet Mars. It lit up the entire planet like a light bulb. Okay, I can show you a video of that if you wish, but that proves that the tail of a comet is not ice particles, that the tail of a comet is plasma. That's electrified particles. This also proves out Joshua's long day. If this planet, which it does, whenever you have a magnetic field getting close to the sun, it warps the plasma coming off of the sun, which is called the solar winds, and it makes a tail behind the object. So as this planet is going to go around our sun and come at the tail points opposite of the sun, and Earth is going to go through this plasma tail. When it gets in between Earth and the sun, just like it'd be similar to like an eclipse, but the tail of the comet is covering Earth. Well, it's going to stop the energy that causes Earth to rotate, because the energy from the sun is what feeds the Earth that causes it to rotate. And plasma will be shielding Earth in a very concentrated form. So this is how, in Joshua's time, the Earth stopped. It was like turning a dimmer switch. It slowed down within 24 hours or so and came to a complete stop. The moon did also. It came to a complete stop. We have a physical model that represents that. And that's what science is. If you can take observed phenomena, and that's what the Hebrews wrote, was observed phenomena, bring it into the laboratory, which is software, build a model and show that it's repeatable, that's science. Well, throughout the Bible, there's plenty of science if you know what you're looking at. There's 14 events that clearly defines the after effects and the effects during the passing of this planet through our solar. Not always does it pass close to Earth. And there's one very remarkable comment in the book of Revelation, which is a future event. It says the next time that this object passes, it's going to be the worst time in all of Earth's history. Well, since Yeshua died, that was 2,000 years ago, this planet has passed 5 to 6 times. This one in Revelation is going to be the 6th time. And how is it that they qualified not the other 5 times, but this 6th time, the time that's going to pass the 6th time, and state only when Israel is reformed, that generation that saw Israel reformed would not die, which is the Holocaust generation, that all of it will be fulfilled. And Psalm states a generation as being 70 and 80. Well, when you get past 89 years and 0.9 of that year, you almost reach 90. Well, Revelation, even the Great Tribulation, should be fulfilled according to the promise that he stated. We're in the end times and we're very close. Now, there's 2 more times in the near future here that the moon is at the foot of Virgo. I think I sent you a chart. You might want to put that one up. We had a lineup. I show 4 lineups here. We had a lineup on the Sabbath year of 2016. We had one on the Jubilee year of 2017. Now, this has to be fulfilled before the 71st Jubilee comes around, which is the next 50 years. Okay, that has to be, and it even shortens the time even further when you look at the generation. Well, the next 2 times that the moon is at the foot of Virgo in a March, April setting, not a September setting, because this is a sign that everyone can see, not just a few people with software. This is going to be in the nighttime sky of near Passover. You have it in 2020 and 2021. One of the qualifiers throughout the past events is that in most cases, it brought with it 7 years of drought, global drought. Not just a global drought. If you look at some of the details pertaining to Egypt, the Hebrews were at the mouth of the Nile River, where it was swamp, and that's where they were taking care of the cattle and the goats and sheep and everything else that people sold just to get grain. And they were taking care of the Pharaoh's animals. Okay, well, that's where there was still water, and it seemed like they were the least affected on the drought. But the rest of the world, as stated, not just Egypt, went through a very severe drought. Well, this is multiple times. It was stated also in the time of Saul and David, a 7-year drought. We have it about 5 or 6 times, 7 years of drought. Remember in Revelation, when the 2 witnesses come, they bring with them 3.5-year drought. And that's during the Great Tribulation. Well, the pattern tells us that mid of the drought is when this planet passes. Mid of a 7 or mid of whatever drought it's going to be. There was one time, it was Ruth, it was 10 years of drought because the object was passing slower. It didn't have its full speed. But we have a qualifier that the 2 prophets are bringing with them 3.5-year drought. That's half of it. So that tells us this time it's going to be 7 years of drought. So prior to the arrival, we should see an additional 3.5 years of drought, giving us a total of 7. So from Day of Atonement, when we about the same time as right now, but next year, if we start to see a global drought in the makings, and you can start to read right now if you go check, Australia was hit with a drought where they lost something like 43 to 47% of their wheat crop. You can start looking at the levels of the Mississippi. They're 45% below. In certain areas, it's even dry. The Colorado is over 43% low. Our rivers are drying up. We see the same thing happening in the Tigris and the Euphrates. So be aware of the levels of the water levels in the rivers. In the Colorado River alone, I think it's something like 34 million people that will be affected if the Colorado dries up. You got dams with electrical, you got the irrigation, everything. So you're looking at a massive migration of people that would have to move possibly. So if we start to see a global drought, and I do say if, I have no ability to predict the future. I can only relate data and give you possible scenarios. But the lineups are unique when the moon is at the foot of Virgo. The lineup of this generation, the Holocaust generation, coming up to an age, they're in the mid 80s. If they reach 90, then the Almighty lied to us, which he didn't. He's not going to, because he already says he would do things to hold up his name, his honor. He would not tell us something that's false. So we're in this season that we need to pay close attention to. When we have these lineups and we see droughts of magnitudes of global coverage, we need to look at the skies. And we look at Sagittarius right here. This is south of the universe. On the ecliptic, that's the only way that you can have a double meteor shower, and with a pivot point to the center of the sun. That's 3 fixed points. Remember in Noah's flood, there was 2 major events, 150 days apart. That was the entry and the exit of the meteors coming in, the planet coming in, leaving, and the Earth passed through the meteor showers that was left with the debris behind it. Read Revelation, see 6 and 7 are 2 meteor showers. It says fiery hail. And it says that they will wish death for 5 months before death comes. 5 months is 150 to 152 days old. In modern times, because the calendar changed during Hezekiah's time, it moved from 360 to 365 and a quarter days. That means the orbital period between the entry and exit is 152 and 1/8 day apart in modern time. And it is definite we have a serious problem. It has come through our universe multiple times. About 3 to 4 times it has come very close to Earth. Earth has tilted 26 to 28 degrees. And the Bible clearly gives us a warning. This next time is the worst time in all of Earth's history. Noah's flood is not the worst. This next time it comes around will be catastrophic. Earth will tilt 26 to 28 degrees. You'll be bathed in plasma on the daylight side of Earth that's facing the comet tail. Remember where the Bible says that the temperature of the sun will be several times what is normal? They're talking about the heat of the sun. But it's not really the sun, it's the tail. Remember, the sun in the ancient time, helios in Greek meant illuminated body. It's whether or not it's the sun or this comet is left up to the interpreter. So this comet could be the illuminated object that they're talking about. The tail pointing straight at Earth, it would compress our magnetic field tremendously, if not weaken it. And temperatures, temperatures are caused by the radiation hitting our upper atmosphere. It's not necessarily the heat of the sun. It's the reaction between the radiation and the molecules that are in our atmosphere that causes the heat. And it's cooler in the north and the south, but towards that. So we're looking at severe heat on the side of Earth that's facing this comet tail. And remember, Yeshua comes mid of night. Jerusalem is going to be on the opposite side, midnight. And there'll be 12 additional hours of darkness on that side and 12 additional hours of daylight on North and South America. It gives the details that without knowing Kepler's laws of planetary motion or the physics involved, which we know now work out completely correct. How did they get these details? I can create a model that follows the exact details as they're laying them out.
Could I jump in real quick and ask you a
Sure.
question, Gil? So you said it's about every 360 years is the orbit of,
Approximate, yes.
okay. So now does that mean, when does it cause the most effect on the planet? Is it when it's at perihelion, or is it, I mean, and then I have a question after that.
Aphelion is the furthest point. Perihelion is the closest to the sun.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's not right there that it has the biggest effect. It's after it rounds the sun. You have roughly about 40 days before it crosses Earth's path. And Earth will be so close to it that it'll pass probably between the moon and Earth to show the effects that the biblical records are talking about. It has to pass close enough, like two magnets, where they tilt, they lean towards each other. Opposite poles will attract, and Earth will start to tilt about 6 hours or so before it crosses our path. It will start the tilt process. Then, as its maximum tilt would be around 26 to 28 degrees, if it's anything like the past. And then, as it starts to leave, it takes about 6 hours for it to straighten back out. But it does not come to the exact point. It's between 3 to 7 degrees off from its original point of where North Pole was, because you have slippeage between the crust and the core. So in other words, if the models, the way the Bible has given us a model that mid of night is Jerusalem, and the 1/3 of the grass, trees, and rivers that they're talking about is North and South America, the way the tilt would happen and the way it would come back, the North Pole would probably be somewhere in mid of Canada when it's all finished with. But you're looking at, remember where the Bible says every mountain and island is moved? Well, that happens when you have a tilt. Remember where it says he sends 4 angels to stop the winds? The only way that you can stop the winds is if you stop the rotation. There's an old prophet in the Bible that says, I will turn day into night and night into day. That's the same thing as saying, I will make noon into midnight, midnight into noon. That's a 12-hour delay in Earth's rotation. The data is there if you know how to interpret it.
Now, what is interesting, what I would also like to know as well is, you brought up how there's records in Asia, and there's other prophecies and scriptures that talk about this 360-year timeline. That's one thing that I'd be fascinated to know about, is more of the literature and scriptures outside of the Holy Bible that discuss this timeline of cataclysms about every 360 years. There we go. Perfect.
Let's see. Okay, so you're able to see just the file?
Yep, it's just the file now.
Okay. All right, let's... this is the white paper report, one of them. There's 2 pertaining to this. What we thought was a supernova in 1054 actually happened, but a few months earlier than what the described events that's in this actual paper. This shows an object going through multiple constellations, and a supernova is stationary. Okay, I'll just coast through here. Here's the Chinese writings, or the Asian writing. Remember, it was Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. From all 3 sources, they were able to put this paper together. We'll show you what the results were in a minute here. Let me get to the end here. Each one of these sightings, what I did was I created a capture screen, the software showing the view from Earth, just like this here. Whenever they saw it in, this one was 9 a.m. July 4th. All right. They gave us a star. They said it was X distance from it. And what this shows us here on the view above Earth that was right here. And we go through, we plot all of these events here. There was an eclipse that it caused here. And we go through and we plot this, and this thing is plotted on the ecliptic. And what that does is ends up giving us this result tells us that we have a very large object. They saw it for 26 months. That's over 2 years. And the telescope wasn't even invented yet. This is naked eye observation. Well, the largest comet that I'm aware of that I was able to research, that we only saw it for 2.5 months. How can we see something 26 months? That's 13 months coming in and 13 months leaving. That can only be a planet-sized object to reflect that much light for naked eye observation, which is a magnitude 6.5. We know the limits of a person's naked eye observation. So when you back up the model for it to gain a 6.5 magnitude and run the model, it matches exactly what they're saying. And guess what? You see this green circle right here? That is Earth here. Well, from the exit to the entry is 152 and 1/8 day apart. That is close enough to Noah's flood of 150 days. And that's definitely within the 5-month period of the book of Revelation. And this gives us a double meteor shower, as Revelation is talking about. Name me one object out there that gives us a double meteor shower. I'm not aware of any. It has to be an object that crosses Earth's path twice. And all objects use the sun as a pivot point. So that's 3 fixed points. So we're looking for something on the ecliptic. The math does not allow it to be off the ecliptic. And this leg right here, when you follow it out, guess where it lands? South of the universe. That's where Sagittarius. And this is where all the perturbations, the orbits of planets are warped in that region of space for the last 2 centuries. This is exactly where they sent the Voyager and Pioneer probes, looking for Planet X, as stated in the news articles. All the data, not just biblical, all scientific data, points to the same area of space for the last 200 years. We have a problem in this area of space, and it's entering our solar system, our known solar system. For it to be here by 2020, and then I said if, people like to misquote when I say things. I'm giving information for people who are observant to go see for themselves when it gets close enough, and where to look, and rough what times. When is the moon at the foot of Virgo? After a 12-hour delay. You have to delay the moon by 12, and you have to delay Earth by 12. This is coming up in 2020 and 2021. We have to be observant. But in between this, remember that's CO6 and 7. That means we have to see CO3, 4, and 5, and the great falling away, and the 40-day warning. All of that has to occur before CO6 comes around. And those have not happened yet. Economic upheaval, it could be extreme highs and extreme lows. It does not have to be a great depression. It could be extreme highs and lows. Right now, a lot of people, there's planning to break away from the dollar. You're going to see a currency war. So you're going to see extreme highs on certain countries and extreme lows on other ones. So it's going to be turmoil in the economic world coming up. That will probably lead to war, and that's what Seal 4 talks about. Seal 5 is a peace agreement. But he says before he returns, a great falling away. Because many people were told in the churches that nothing negative would happen to them. The Bible clearly says you will go through tribulation. It says that. It says for some, a remnant, they will not go through the great tribulation. That's the last 3.5 years. But if you don't prepare there's going to be a shortage of food and probably a shortage of cash, because the banks, they're going to have a bail-in.
You know, back in 2008, remember what Congress was told? They were basically told if they didn't agree to a bailout, that martial law would be declared. And with all of the new discoveries that they're letting us know about with the new telescopes and such, you know, Michael Brown, that calls himself the Pluto killer, because they downgraded Pluto, and then the new discoveries about Planet 9 and all these other KBOs and TNOs, etc. Why is it that I would think that they can probably see this thing if it's there, and they're probably tracking it to the point of, you know, being able to actually observe it quite well. Now, they just wouldn't let us know about it if they saw it as a threat to where it might cause people to panic, and then the economy shuts down because nobody wants to go to work. So that's probably why they're hiding it if it's there. And that also makes me think about the possibilities of, we know for a fact, you can go directly to the Bill of Rhode Island, the Geoengineering Bill 2017, where they discuss different reasons for stratospheric aerosol injections. One of those reasons is to blanket the world and block the sun. I wonder, and it's interesting because some days you'll see San Antonio, beautiful blue skies, no chemical trails. Other days they'll block it, and yes, they do that a lot of times to cause rain and to cloud seed. I get it; that's very easy. But I also wonder if they block certain parts of the skies at certain times to prevent amateur astronomers from being able to pick up on another planetary object or something. But then I also think about how the moon is supposed to have a huge effect on the tidal waves and the gravity of the Earth. So if another planet of that magnitude was to be as close as we might speculate, I would wonder what kind of cause and effects would that have on tidal waves and earthquakes and volcanoes. So it's fascinating to think about the possibilities. And I'm certainly, the way that you put it together on this chart right here, I think this is fascinating, because the data is what's important. You know, you're not just speculating, you're combining data with observations, with records of prophecies. Have you done any research into the Sumerian tablets, the ancient Mesopotamian stuff, when it comes to the astronomy?
Only to a certain level. Okay, I'm learning this now.
Sure, absolutely. And folks, just so you know, this is the first time Gill's been on Zoom, so this is my fault. I brought him up short notice, and he's extremely busy, so it's nice of him to come on the show. We've got a huge crowd right now, Gill, and people seem to really appreciate what you're bringing so far. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd also recommend going to planet7x.net if you'd like to pick up more information about this 7x hypothesis that Gill has done such a good job putting together.
All the charts are free. They can go down there and click on the page. Let me show you. That way they can follow along.
Great.
Let's see here. Let me bring
you've got that ancient star map from Samaria too. Well, that's cool. Wow, you've really gone into detail on that.
Yeah, let me show you this right here, okay? If they go to planet7x.net and go right here, are you able to see my pointer?
Yes.
If they click on this icon of the book right here, it will bring them, and they're able to download the book for free with all of the graphics. So it connects the Bible with actual models. This tablet right here, this disc, it's called the planisphere of Nineveh. There are some other people that kind of explains this, but I don't agree with their interpretation. It's missing. They're trying to link this with Sodom and Gomorrah. And keep in mind, one of the times that this planet passed is during Sodom and Gomorrah. So I don't have a bias against that being the time period, because if it would fit, I would say, okay, it matches what I'm showing here. But the star pattern does not fit that time period, okay? Because I can show you here. Most people don't orientate the disk correctly. This is looking at the southern skies. Here was Leo, okay? Here's Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries, and Pisces, because they're all in order. Then this is Aquarius. This is the viewpoint from the astronomers right here at the time. And this is found in the library of Nineveh of the time period of 687. Why shouldn't it be from that time period? Of course it is. Now, whenever you look at these X's here, I'm going to try to zoom in here. All right. This large X is the sun. The next to largest is the moon. And then you had 3 other planets. And what's interesting, you see this line that goes right here. Well, that's the ecliptic. Remember, I told you this object has to be on the ecliptic. They have a parallel line going across here for the ecliptic as well. Now, what's interesting is this object right here. What does that look like?
It's like a giant asteroid.
Right. They didn't draw it like any other planet, did they? They draw it with a tail, like a comet. These are planets over here. This is Mars, Mercury, and Saturn. This is the sun, but not this one. They didn't put an X there. They showed it with a tail, just like a comet. Well, if we go to the software, we go to February 17th, 687. That happens to be 40 days before Passover. This is in Mosul, Iraq, right next, where Nineveh is. Look what we got here. We have Saturn, Mercury, Mars, the moon, the sun. This was a daytime event. I just turned off the light. And here's this comet that would have been seen in the daytime. Okay. And it's exactly in the this is the orientation. Remember I told you Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius. This matches what there's, and guess what that gives us? February 17th, 687. That happens to be the time of Jonah, when Jonah went and warned Nineveh. The king's astronomers documented the event. That's what this is right here. They were documenting the time of Jonah. We have an exact match to the software. Now, take a close, when you listen to other people that's claiming that this is another, see if they give you a software picture on what it looked like. They don't have it. They're making claims without evidence. We have software right here that matches exactly this disk for the time period. And that is very unique when you have this many objects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in only one constellation, basically, coming in.
So this is also making me think, Gill, about the discovery at Göbekli Tepe, where they found something that showed of an eclipse, or not an eclipse, an asteroid or a comet from 10,500 years ago. And around that time was a cataclysmic, they were able to discover uncover what looked like some type of giant cataclysm at that time as well. So, and created like a valley.
A large wave came in with debris and covered up that whole area. That wasn't just covered up by man. No, it was a catastrophic event that covered it up. You had large water movement. We have many civilizations, like in Peru, massive stones that are thrown around like that's tinker toys. The only way that can happen is that the power of water can move things like that. And we've had ancient civilizations before Noah's time that existed, and they were destroyed. And they had advanced means of moving extremely heavy boulders that it would cost us the a huge sum of money today to try to even attempt to move. Let me show you another one.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up also, let me ask you a question. Do you think that these other planets that they're discovering, these TNOs and KBOs, like Sedna or various other planets, could they also have an effect when they get within the line of the Earth's orbit, or not the line, but like you brought up earlier, it doesn't necessarily need to be at perihelion. It just needs to be in proximity of the Earth, you said?
It has to come close enough, like a magnet,
Okay.
or it has to have, you know, the closer you are to the sun, the less effect these outer planets can have on you, because the sun's effect will overrule them. So the further out you are, the more effects. Like that's why we see Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus being affected by these, because they're so far out. But they're not affected by these smaller ones that you don't. It has to be a very large object, like estimate 5. I would estimate this between 5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth. There's like this planet 9. They're claiming that it's 4 to 5 times larger than Jupiter. Well, that's not the one that came by Earth, because if it would have, Earth wouldn't be here right now. Okay. This has happened multiple times. It's going to happen again, and we're not ready for it. Civilization has not been taught correctly. And the Bible says not to live anywhere in the coastlines globally. So if we start to see a global drought, I will be moving. I will not be living along the coastline.
And also the revelation work that you've done, you do an incredible job breaking down different revelation sills, etc. The New Jerusalem. Would you be, could you spend a little bit of time with us before we close out tonight and talk to us about the information you have on Revelation and the New Jerusalem that descends from heaven?
Sure. Let me take a minute here.
Sure. Fantastic.
Open up something here.
And while you're doing that, I also want to thank everybody for joining us this edition of Leak Project. We've got a bunch of people in the live chat room. Thank you, moderators, for keeping it real and letting people speak their minds without being overzealous. Also, if there's any questions you have for Gill while he's pulling this up, if you want to go ahead and ask, and then I'll make sure to ask him towards the when he gets done talking about Revelation. A lot of thank you, Gills. A lot of people are saying thank you very much. They love the information you're presenting.
You're welcome. I'm glad to. I'm just trying to relay information on a very difficult subject. This is not for just anybody to grab onto, because it's you have to have some kind of knowledge of science to. Okay, are you able to see this? Okay.
Yes.
We're going to start off on the basis of getting back to the Hebrew units of measurements. The Hebrew, like in Revelation, it talks about furlongs. That's a Greek measurement. It's very close to what a stadion was, which is what the Hebrews used. And in stadiums, you have to walk back through their measurement. Remember how America, it used to bother me. Why is it that America had a different unit of measure when the rest of the world had metric? What caused us to change and go and create something right out the blue? Well, it's actually going back to the Hebrew measurements. The width of, now this only works with the male body, not the female. If you take the foot of a man, the length of his foot is equal to 12 of his thumbs. And that's why we have 12 divisions of a foot. the height of a man is equal to 6 of his feet, and the height of a man is equal to 4 cubits, which is from his elbow to the tip of his finger. And we have this Egyptian cubits that shows you a royal cubit, but within that royal cubit is a regular cubit. Okay, a royal cubit is 7 palms. A regular cubit was 6. Okay, so what it turns out to be that the regular cubit is 17.5 inches roughly. Well, we can reverse engineer that to figure out what was the original height of that Hebrew that these standards were created from. So 4 cubits, 4 times 17.5, gives you 70 inches on its height, which happens to be 5'10". That was the height of Adam as well as Yeshua. 5'10". Because that cube has been used throughout history, during Solomon's time and so on. These are the measurements that you have to break down to calculate the New Jerusalem from. So the wall of the New Jerusalem was 144 cubits. Well, when you do the math, it equals out to 210-foot thick wall. The diameter of the New Jerusalem was 12,000 stadians. Well, a stadion right here is 400 cubits or 600 feet of that man right there. So that would equal out to 7,000 inches, or multiply times that would be 7 million feet, which is roughly 1,325 miles. Have you noticed how many sevens we went through right there? So, which the diameter of this is equal to 1,200,000 height of a Hebrew man. 12 basically in the front right there. These are the original units that they used. Okay, so now it says in one part of the Bible that when one of the prophets was coming up to the new Jerusalem, he said it looked like a mountain. And if you follow his procession, he's describing it as he walked through the points. He didn't skip. He was, as he was getting to it, he was giving his description. It's in the order that he was seeing it. So the first comment he makes, he says it's like a mountain. And another part, it says it comes out of the second heaven. There's 3 heavens in the Bible. First heaven is where the birds fly. That's our atmosphere. Second heaven is where the planets and stars dwell. That's space. Third heaven, it says where only the Father dwells. That's another dimension. Well, it says the New Jerusalem comes out of the second heaven into our atmosphere, the first heaven. So the vacuum of space, and if there's people living in, which we know they do because it states it, if they have to have an atmosphere like we have on Earth, that's 14.7 pounds pressure, and that wall of this New Jerusalem has to hold that pressure of 14.7 pounds. Well, there's only 2 shapes that can hold that pressure: a sphere and a dome. A sphere doesn't look like a mountain, but a dome does. We go further. It says, okay, it was like a precious jewel. The height and the wall was, with a great height, the wall with 12 gates, 12 individual gates. It says the width was equal to a height. Well, when you stand in the center of a dome, that's exactly what you have. If you stand from outside, it doesn't matter. But from the center, and when you look at his progression of what he's seeing, when he makes that statement, he's standing in the center of the new Jerusalem. The height is equal to its width. We're looking at a dome, and when we do the calcs, well, first we have to figure out, okay, he said he laid out a city in a square. Well, how big is the square? And when he said he laid it out, that infers on something. Okay, otherwise he said, I just created it in a square. He didn't say that. He didn't say I created the city in a square. It says, I laid it out in a square. Well, that infers on something. The only other thing that I can see that was created was Eden. The garden was east of Eden. Well, if you put the center of Eden on Jerusalem and draw a circle of a total width of 1,325 miles, and the garden was the east, out of the eastern gate, east of Eden, you come where this gate is exactly in between the Tigris and Euphrates River, as the text states. How did they get a satellite view to better write this down? There's no way that they could have guessed that correctly. They hit such a small patch of land right here. So we're going to take a closer look here. We're going to use modern engineering formulas that we use for offshore to calculate vessel thicknesses using pressure. And the pressure we're dealing with is 14.7 pounds. That's atmosphere pressure with a wall. Let's see, it was 210 foot thick. And our first measurement is steel. Steel has a tensile strength of 3,600 psi per square inch. When we run this calculation here, it tells us for 14.7 pounds, the wall had to be 8 feet thick. Well, that means the material is too weak to give us 210 foot thick wall. The steel is too weak. So we try titanium. Titanium is twice the liable stress, which is the hardness of steel. When we do the calcs, it tells us the wall had to be 787 feet thick. That still doesn't meet our 210. So I was about ready to give up, and this lady walked behind and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't have a hard enough material to make this formula work out." And only a woman would think like this. She says the hardest thing's a diamond. I stopped and I thought, I said, you know, you're right. A diamond is only carbon. So it took me about a month or more to find the properties of diamond. There was a hard and soft diamond. So I took the mid of it. Well, the diamond in the mid part is still a little bit too strong. I have to reduce the problem by about 12% to 11%, which happens to be often a common safety factor we put in there. And when we do the calcs, it gives us 210 foot thick. Exactly what the text says. Now the next line under that says the wall is as clear as glass. Steel and titanium is not clear. Diamond is. How did they get that right? Remember, these are people that built things with clay, stone, and wood. We're talking about an item with modern day calculations, with tensile strengths, or the science of the materials, which were not developed except in the last 150 years. And it matches to a physical item that we can calculate this, but we can't build it today. But our calculation says it's possible. Now, how come they can give us parameters that falls within? Because if you look at the strength chart, once you get past titanium, there's hardly nothing after that. You got to go a long ways before you hit diamond. And then there's a hard and soft, there's a narrow little band to hit. Then there's nothing after that. And they hit exactly in the middle of that. How is that possible? Then it says that each gate, there's 12 gates, each gate was like a pearl. That's the same thing as saying a sphere. Each gate is a sphere. Well, guess what? That's the only type of shape that can hold pressure. If you'd had a 210-foot thick wall and put swinging doors on a hinge, they can't hold pressure. It's blowing it right off the hinge. Only a spherical gate, like in a ball valve, can hold pressure. You rotate this, you see you can see where the tunnel is right down the center of it. Whenever you roll it 90 degrees, it's sealed. It holds atmosphere. You roll it back, it's open. Remember how it says the streets are like gold, but yet clear as glass? Champagne diamond is clear and gold.
You know, let me jump in for a second, because the new Jerusalem that descends from heaven I find fascinating, in the descriptions and the details. And I did an analysis where I came up to a 1,500-mile length, you know, so 1,500 miles by
Yeah,
1,500
that's using
miles.
furlong, right? That's using the Greek measurements, correct?
And I came up to a measurement of the size of it being one. Well, essentially, each person that would be a part of it would have 10,000 acres, because it was, I times 144,000 people times 10,000 acres, and I came to that conclusion of the size of the mass, and the width of about 216 feet on the pure jasper walls and stuff like that. What I think might be wrong or something, but what you were bringing up, I was wondering, could they possibly use like graphene or something? I mean, you would think that diamonds are that strong, but aren't there alloys and stuff that are even stronger than diamonds? So maybe that could explain some of the dimensions that you were not sure about because of the weight.
Well, diamonds are made out of carbon, which is just it's the advanced form of graphene, if you want to look at it. Okay, but keep in mind, nothing is going to wear it out. This object is built one time. You can walk on it, drive on it, do whatever you got to. You'll never wear it out, because whatever is touching it is softer than the material that it is made out of. This is the only way to build something that's eternal in a structure. How did the Hebrews design something that's eternal with only mud, brick, and wood knowledge?
Do you study the Kabbalah?
Not study. No. I look at ancient. I look for ancient records pertaining to observed phenomena. I do not look at seeing if somebody. I do not follow the commandments of the Pharisees, where they override God's commandments. Nor do I follow the Pope, who overwrites the God, you know, the Almighty that's in the Bible. No man has the right to override it, and that's where religion has misguided us. Let me show you what you were talking about earlier: population.
The only reason I asked that is because I know that you do a really good job of breaking down a lot of scriptures, and I don't know much at all about the Kabbalah, but from somebody that I talked to that lives in the Middle East that speaks Hebrew, I think that the Kabbalah is actually linked to the Torah, or so I didn't know if you spoke Hebrew as well, because I know you have so much knowledge on scriptures. I was just trying to. Anyway, never mind.
I study ancient.
What's that?
Back to the reason why I'm only in that is because I'm going back to the original meaning of the word. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean I can read it fluently. No, I look up key words, because once you have the key word defined properly, now you know the context of the sentence and what it's talking about. And context has changed over the year, believe it or not, from the original writings. And that's people have to do their own research. Remember what you were saying, that you did some calculations on how many people you can fit in the New Jerusalem. This is the square that's in the center of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you had the density of Paris, if you took 7 billion people like we have today, it would fit in these 3 states right here at the density of Paris. If you took it on, let's see where, Houston does a little bit extra. But you can fit from New York City at the density of New York City, that would be the entire state of Texas. There's plenty of room in the New Jerusalem to fit everybody on earth that's ever lived.
Okay. I remember how I came up with that number 144,000 because it says in Revelation there's going to be 144,000 people that receives this the seal. So I did some math, and based on the math that I did, it was pretty fascinating because I linked it up to if there are 144,000 people that were a part of the New Jerusalem, then they would each have 10,000 acres.
I don't know what happened there.
That was kind of, man, we just got harped, man. That was CERN on overload.
Yeah.
Electromagnetic frequency. I almost started to have a seizure there, Gill. I'm glad you turned that off.
Well, I was going back to the PDF. So I guess I overloaded the system again.
Man, that was spooky. Several people said they just had grand mal seizures, but they're okay now.
All right, great. Well, let me finish up about the New Jerusalem. We can talk about some other things here.
Cool.
Real quick. So he laid out the city in a square on a existing object or solid that happens to be the base of the of Eden. All right. So when we come back and we look, well, how big is the square of Eden? Well, remember the land that he gave Israel was from the Nile to the Euphrates. Well, when you put the center of this in Jerusalem and you stretch it out, guess what? You have an exact match from cattle corner to cattle corner of the square. Now, how do we check this to see if it's right? Well, it happens to match the Fibonacci formula in its relationship to the circle, which happens to be the Almighty's fingerprint of all of nature. You can go throughout nature and see how it's that it follows the Fibonacci sequence. Well, this is exactly the ratio between the circle and the square here, is this Fibonacci spiral in measurement that happens to be. See, you see the difference when we use the proper measurements? Going back to the original Hebrew measurements, this is the only way it works. And so that gives us the proper sequence. So we have a real object that the Hebrews were talking about that man can't build today, but man can calculate, which I find that quite interesting.
How do you think they saw it? I mean, do you think it was a vision? Do you think that it was using some type of math formula like secret code, Da Vinci style?
No, he was brought up there, literally. He was brought up there and he was handed a staff to measure it. He measured a physical object because he didn't say it was his dream. You know, whenever they say they have a vision, they say it's a vision, but he didn't say it's a vision. He said he was brought up there and then he was handed a staff and he physically measured these items. That's how we have the measurements. Then he gave a description that it's like this shining, I forgot what he uses. He used different stones. He said, but he used the word like. In other words, it's representing the color. See, diamond comes in all these colors that the base is mentioned. The base has to be thicker than a wall for it to, matter of fact, it's an interesting thing. You have to have a pre-stressed base that's curved, that matches the curvature of the earth. Because once you put pressure on it in space, it flattens out. And in space, you don't have gravity. So walking on something flat, it will feel as if it's flat. But if you put a flat object of this diameter on Earth, it'll feel as if you're walking down into a valley, constantly leaning, unless it follows the curvature of the Earth. And it does both. This, like I said, it's, you can see the size here. Let's see if I can, you can see the size right here of it compared to the Earth on this little drawing right here. Now, if you can tell me ancient man 2,000 years ago had that type of imagination, no. And satellite views, all of this is satellite. When you're talking about the big picture, the satellite views from the Nile to the Euphrates, with the center being Mr. Drew, they had no surveying equipment to give them that accurate of measurements to be able to do that, nor for it to be at the eastern gate to land exactly in between the Tigris and Mr. Euphrates River. He was giving them the land, a mirror image on earth as it was in heaven. Just like the Ark of the Covenant. He showed them a real Ark of the Covenant in heaven and told them to duplicate one for here on earth. Everything is a mirror image for a real event to come down, a real Jerusalem, real territory, you know, that falls within those boundaries. This is not vain religious writings. This is real. People need to get a grip on that.
I wonder when, you know, the description of the New Jerusalem also, and I've talked to other people about what they think God could be. Does it sound almost like I don't want to use the term artificial intelligence, but for those that might, you know, think of that term, could it be like a non-biological entity that uses technology that has, you know, it reminds me of the Cylons almost, and some type of like ship that literally comes down after almost everything's been destroyed. And then it talks about how people will have no more pain and no more suffering, but it doesn't, I mean, it makes me wonder, will they have any emotions? Will there be any emotions left? Will people live on this ship? Do you see people actually going on this ship?
This is not so-called the mothership. No. No, listen, let me give you a little bit of what the Tanakh, the Torah says, okay? Remember I told you there was 3 heavens? The third one was another dimension that only the Father dwells there. Well, you need to know the description of the Father. The Father is not male, he's not female, he's not human. He's 7 spirits. All right? He has no form. Can't make a likeness of it. Well, the word spirit in Hebrew can also mean energy. 7 different energies. Well, this is not dumb energy. No, it's omnipotent, super intelligent, all-knowing. All right? Now, remember where he said he knew you before you were born? Because you have an outer shell, there's just like software. I mean, a computer, you have hardware and you got software. Software is run by electrical, where the hardware is just solid material, okay? For you to be born, he had to give a little bit of his energy for you to be created. Before the molecules can misignite and start building, had to take energy. He knew you before you were born, he said. Einstein said that matter is just light turned to a frequency that we can observe. All matter is just energy going at light speed in a little circle, a tight circle. And you look at a periodic table, it's just different light at different frequencies. That's what matter is. All matter is energy, even your body. So you're made out of 2 levels of energy, 1 matter, 1 spiritual, but there's still 2 levels of energy. The Father is 7 levels of energy. Okay? In other words, everything that was put into this came from his energy. And if you know the first law of the thermodynamics, energy cannot be created, cannot be destroyed. It always existed. It can only change form. Well, that's eternal. The only thing in this universe right here, remember, there's no new energy from day one to now where it's the same amount of energy. And there's no new energy. And that's the only thing in the universe that's eternal. That is the Father. We're living in a thought, a part of his thought. If he didn't like it, he could zap us right out of his memory. And we're gone completely. All this matter would be turned back into energy. Remember how it says that we're the center of the universe. It's not the physical center, but we are the center of creation because this was all created around us for us. This is to interact with your smell, taste, feel, emotions, everything. This is specifically designed for you. This is not an accident. You can't have an accident on this level with the New Jerusalem right there and everything else. And think of it like this. You have a parade and you have someone that's in a helicopter that's above the parade. They see people getting onto the floats at the beginning. They see people having fun in the middle, and they see people getting off the parade, the floats at the end. But only his view can he see both ends of time. Where when we're participating in the middle, we can't. We only see what's in front of us. The third heaven is another dimension, and only he can tell the future, as told to us in the book of Revelation and other parts of the Bible as well. He's omnipotent, all-knowing. The physical world is where we are living in. He gave us a physical reality of the New Jerusalem. Remember, at the end of the 1,000-year reign, he makes a whole new earth. And then the New Jerusalem sets on earth. And that's going to be like the time of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve was the perfect earth. He says, heaven is going to be on earth. He says, like it is in heaven, let it be on earth. The heaven he's talking about is the New Jerusalem. Like it is in the New Jerusalem, let it be like it is on earth. Our reality is physical, with the Spirit being in us. Remember, you are an eternal being. Your spirit is. It will never go away. He can, unless the Father wants to send it into outer darkness. That's the other end of the universe. That's where the people who don't believe in him are sent. They're sent to outer darkness.
You know, the number 7, Gill, I find to be linked with so many different, 7 days of the week. If you read through even Eastern philosophies, 7 is very powerful. If you read through the ancient Mesopotamian spirituality and philosophy and story, 7, they've got this is a very powerful number. So it's interesting how you brought that up, the 7 spirits, the 7 energies of God. And, with that being said, I also wonder what your thoughts are on how much longer do you feel after the planet 7X does its next flyby? How much longer after that would this New Jerusalem descend? And, and obviously it's just, I'm not going to put your, say this guy said for a fact. I mean, it's what do you feel and what do you think? And I'm a conspiracy theorist in my grandma's garage. So, I mean, you're not going to say.
You see, basically I have no opinion. I can just quote you what the Bible says.
Perfect.
Revelation is the Great Tribulation is 3.5 years. The New Jerusalem hovers in the clouds where the Antichrist is looking up after the rapture. Everyone is sitting on a sea of glass. That's the bottom of this new Mr. Jerusalem in the clouds, he says. The Antichrist is looking up and sees us. Guess what? That's the marriage supper. And the marriage supper, unless you follow the Hebrew customs, you won't know how long that is. A marriage takes place for 1 year long. A Hebrew groom cannot go to war till after 1 year of marriage. So that celebration is for 1 year before he can, and that's during the time of the 7 bowl judgments. That's the Father's wrath on earth on the Antichrist. And that's for 1 year long. Then the groom can come back to earth and defeat the Antichrist. Then he goes back up. The guests of the wedding are the ones that are told to go back to earth now, because there's 3 groups. There's the bride, the bridemaid, and the guest. The guests are told to go back to earth. It takes them 7 months to bury the dead, 7 years to burn the implements of war. And they got to rebuild on earth. And they're going to live by his laws that they've forsaken. 10 of the commandments is not all of his laws. And you're not under this law, but you're to follow his law because it builds holy, righteous character. One of his laws says don't have sex with animals. Why would you want to do away with that? Okay, there are a few countries right now that's passing laws that saying that's not it, that's nothing wrong with that now, to have sex with animals. This world is really getting warped. Okay, so just you see the problems we have in Washington, D.C. One of the laws that a lot of people have forsaken, every individual is not allowed to take a bribe. It says do not take a bribe. If that would be true, then we would have no crooked politicians. That would solve that in Washington overnight. But they're told they only have to follow 10. Do you see where the problem lies? If you stick with only 10, then look at your news and see how many other ones we're breaking. And tell me if this is a good world to live in. So the guests of the wedding got to return, and they got to clean the earth, and they got to rebuild their life. They're there for the next 1,000 years, learning to go back. Remember where it says, even he talks to Egypt, says if you don't return to Jerusalem for the feast, which is going to be for Passover, if you don't show up, I'll put a drought on you until you do. It will not rain on the land. That's during the 1,000-year reign. Why is he doing that? If we don't have to follow the feast, which is not really feast. The word mekrah in Hebrew means dry rehearsal. When you're rehearsing something, you're waiting for a real event. The rehearsal is getting you ready to be prepared for a real event. Remember Sukkot, where it says you build a temporary shelter like a tent and learn to live in it for a week. I didn't know what that was until I went to Jerusalem. When I went to Jerusalem for Passover and I looked around, now I understood why Sukkot was there. Those buildings are made out of stone blocks. You can't live in them when this planet is going to come, because they're not made for earthquakes. They won't be safe. So you have to live in temporary shelters, which is tent, and he's already telling them to practice this. These are not vain religious acts. If you have enough sense, you see the practicality and the common sense in what he's telling you. Does any of your guests have, any of your followers have questions?
Let's find out. Absolutely, Gill. Thank you for asking. Folks, now is a great time to ask questions, and I'll go ahead and relay that to Gill. I'm looking at the live comments right now, and folks that haven't had an opportunity or do not have an opportunity to watch this live, let's say you're listening to this later tonight or tomorrow or next week or next month or next year or 5 years from now. That's one of the neat things about YouTube is you have an opportunity to watch a podcast from 5 years ago. And a lot of times, especially when I talk to people like Gill, we get information that is timeless. And especially when you study scriptures and you study different religions and prophecy and astronomy and the stars and cataclysms and want to be aware of things, you bring a very detailed point of view to the table, and you're extremely firm in your beliefs. And I respect that big time. I look at all the people that I've interviewed, and so many different points of view. And it's neat to talk to people like you that instead of just having an opinion based on something that you've heard, you actually do the research and the data, and then you come up to your conclusion based on the research and the data, and you'll use science and you'll use math and you'll use scriptures as well, and you'll link them all together. And, you know, I think that's fantastic. And I know that people appreciate that as well. And everybody that's in the chat room seems to really appreciate it. Now let's see what we have here as far as questions go. So do you let me see. What do you think about the Adam and Eve story? Have you heard the Adam and Eve story by Chan Thomas?
No, I don't recognize the name.
Okay, that's fine. It was actually something that I discovered from the from an alphabet agency's website, Freedom of Information. And anyway, so yeah, we'll ask another question then. They talked about the inner Earth like leaking some gray matter from the core.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
There, you got it. That's cool. All right. Not even a 10-foot pole, ladies and gentlemen. You hear that? Not even a 10-foot pole. All right, let's find another one. When will the rapture occur? Pre, mid, or post tribulation?
When will the what?
The rapture.
Well, the word, let's get back that the word rapture is not really, and we're going to put back the words that it actually says taking away. And if you look carefully, because the word rapture is easily to imply to the other taking aways that are said, and it's not supposed to. There's a taking away where it's a remnant that goes to the wilderness. This is referred to as the greater taking away or the greater exodus. Well, if you have a greater, it means you had a minor. Okay? That means there's two exodus involved. Well, it says that that's why the second taking away is of the 7th month of the Hebrew calendar, where it's known as the day that no man knows the day or the hour. Okay, that is known in the Hebrew calendar, and that's around the last trump. Well, that's where the dead are first, and and what remnant of the living is left will go up. There's two remnants, one that's living comfortably in the wilderness, and one that just made it to the great tribulation, okay, without being in the place of safety. He said, if you're not in that place of safety and you go through the great tribulation and you make it alive, he says, count yourself lucky. Very few of you will. Jews and Christians are going to be hunted down like dogs by Islam. Now, the remnant, if you're following his feasts, which are not feasts, they're dry rehearsals, you should be there for Sukkot, which is 6 months prior to Passover, because those last 6 months on that planet's approach is going to be very difficult on Earth. You want to be in Jerusalem for Sukkot and stay there until Passover, where he says in Malachi 4:5, see, I am sending you Elijah the prophet before the coming and the great and awesome day of Yahovah. This is where they show up at Passover. Passover night is when they're before night falls, they're going to turn off all generators globally because we're entering into the tail of the plasma. Okay? That will kill any generator if they don't. So they got to turn them off. You're having a private meeting with Elijah. The Bible already tells us there's only one warning to the wicked and adulterous generation. That is the sign, basically the sign of Jonah, 40-day warning. That's the only warning the world is going to get. 40 days. They will not hear the warning that Moses and Elijah showed up. 3.5 days after this is when the Yeshua shows up, mid of night. Those are the total 3 days of darkness that happens when we're in the tail of this comet. And he takes the bride and the bridemaid and brings them to a place in the wilderness that he has prepared for them. And that's where you sit out the great tribulation. But it's not all believers that make it, because not all believers are following his covenant. These are for the few. That's why he says remnant. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to make it to heaven, the ones who are not following it. The ones who believe in the Father and the Son, the Messiah and the Father, some of these will go through the Great Tribulation. And at the end, whoever makes it, he said, the dead are first and then the living. That's on the 7th month. Remember, 3.5 years later. 1,260 days later is the second taking away. And that's to heaven. Go read your Bible carefully. There's 2 taking aways. One is a taking away to the wilderness, and one is taking away to heaven. You're going to have to apply where are they and what the Passover and the last trump are exactly 6 months apart. We know the last one, the last trump, is the dead are risen. Well, Moses and Elijah are dead now at the end of 3.5 year because that's when the Antichrist kills them. And that's what stops the Islamic army. They're celebrating the death of the 2 prophets, and they don't wipe out that remnant that falls to their knees in the desert. You see? Read it carefully and understand. Pray that your eyes are open, because I can't open them. I can only point to the scripture. The Father is the one who closes his eyes and opens them. Read and understand this. If you're following his dry rehearsals, then you will be in Jerusalem, because 3 of these out of 7 feasts, you're required to be in Jerusalem to fulfill these things. Well, Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover are right next to each other. Passover is when Elijah comes. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is when Yeshua comes. So if you're following what his instructions, you can't go to heaven and say, how come you didn't rapture me? He'll turn to you and say, how come you didn't follow my instructions? He says, you will follow these forever. He didn't say 2,000 years. And the law that that Yeshua was saying not to follow, there was 2 laws during his time period. There was the Talmud, which is the rabbinical laws that were superseding Mosaic law. He says, you shall not follow the Talmud, basically. You not follow anyone who overwrites my laws, because you don't have the right to change a dot or tittle of his laws. Those are exact words he says.
So, wow, I'm looking at the response of people with questions that are listening to the show, Gill, and I've got over a dozen good questions. So I'll give you warning, so you can kind of put a certain timeline on each question, because
Right,
I know
the first one's the long one. Okay, after this should be short.
This is great, though. Thank you so much, Gill. I mean, I love the way that you're explaining things, and the audience is as well. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us this edition of Leak Project. Somebody asked what your website is. It is, let me give this shout out real quick. It's planet7x.net. Is that correct?
Correct.
Planet7x.net. And then somebody said, is Gill single? LOL, just joking. Winner asked that. You got some happy.
Yes, I am.
There you go, Winner. Winner's a nice lady that listens to Leak Project. She's been a subscriber for a long time. There you go, Winner. And somebody asks, is Gill a Hebrew Israelite? I don't know what that means.
I follow Torah as best as I can under the conditions as it was originally written. That's what I try to do. No one's perfect, but I try my best. And I would recommend your followers to get a passport, because without it, you won't be able to. Remember, you need to start following the feast before this planet arrives. You got to be listed on their computer as one who's been already there following the feast. Because when this emergency comes around and people are panicking and they have to look at their computer, say, and they're asking you, why are you coming? Say, well, I'm coming to follow the feast. They'll say, why? You haven't followed it before. You're only here because you're panicking. So get a track record established and get a passport. It won't kill you to follow. Remember, some of you think that you're going to be raptured anywhere. Fine. Good. What's wrong with being raptured in Jerusalem to where you cover both bases? Are you that stubborn not to follow something he said to do? Some people, yes, they are.
Now you feel, and we've talked about this before, I mean, you feel that's pretty much the only safe place on the planet when it gets to the point of the I don't know which part in Revelation, but when it gets to a certain point, you think the only safe place is going to be in that area, correct?
Without a doubt, it's the pivot point of the tilt. If you understand, remember he already named the 1/3 of grass, trees, and rivers. Well, only half of a globe can be hit at any given time because it's a globe. If it'd be flat, like some people think, well, it could be the entire flatness of it, but that's not what it is. It's a globe. Okay, so only half of the Earth is hit. The other half is protected. That's the nighttime side. And what time does Yeshua show up? Mid of night. Okay, that's not to be mixed up with a rapture. Rapture, he doesn't show up at. He's in heaven. You're brought to him. That particular saying says he shows up mid of night. Two different events. They're qualified completely different. And they both have to fit. And too many people are trying to combine this into one. It's not. Leave it as it is. One is at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and one is at the end of the Great Tribulation.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Gill. And the next question is, I think this is a good question also. Can you explain the way that sacred geometry and quantum physics relate and how the dynamics of both create and manifest this multiverse or dimension that we're in?
No, I won't go into that. That would be I kind of limit myself with the Fibonacci and the golden triangle and see how it fits on some of the design that he's already stating. Anything beyond that is speculation.
And I had a feeling after I asked the second part of that question, especially, I had a feeling you're going to say that, but I totally get it. Totally get it. And I respect that and appreciate that 100%. What do you think about those sounds around the world that have been heard that sound like trumpets? Do you think those are actually trumpets, or do you think that has something to do with tectonic plates moving, or what do you think they are?
Remember, trumpet could mean a sound in the Bible. It doesn't have to be a blowing of a horn unless he says the blowing of the horn they gave a sound. So when the aurora is active or when a sun flare hits, sometimes that's protons causing the micro lightnings, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, sparks or whatever, will cause a sound. When you go, that's mostly happens close to our poles. When the aurora is very active, you will hear sounds. Now, some of these videos I listen to, and those are simply when temperatures get very, very cold and trains are moving slowly on tracks, you have that hum. Some of those, you can hear the trains crashing, when they're buckling up box cars to each other. Some of those videos are fake, but some of them are real. And those are the sounds from usually the aurora. You can't see it during the daytime, but an overactive aurora, or it could be a pre-sign for an earthquake coming in, because there's 4 major faults on the East Coast that are not talked about that are just as big as the San Andreas. And that's where you're seeing some of these birds are dying because of methane releases, sinkholes, and different things like. There's 4 major earthquakes under the East Coast that are not talked about. So that's about as best I can explain it.
Okay, thank you for that. And the next question is, do you believe that this person believes that he's been seeing images being released in the public domain that could be Planet 7X, or something following it. What is your take on that?
There's nothing in the public, Mr. Domain, that's valid as a Planet X sighting. If there would be, I would shout it from the top of the roof that this is a valid one, because I'd take my telescope and I would confirm it. There's 2 to 3 million amateur astronomers. If there was an actual planet within our sight, okay, you would have close-up pictures of it. Until that happens, and it probably won't, because if it was that close, they'd shut down the internet just to maintain order for another 3 to 6 months before having chaos in the streets. So once you start to see the internet going down, start looking up towards Sagittarius. It's going to look like a star or a comet, and it won't be threatening at all. Not even when it's at its position. Let me see if I can find it here for you.
And I just want, while you're pulling that up, I need to say something, because I'm reading some of the comments in the chat room. There's a lot of people that believe these images that they've seen are legit with, Planet X or this binary star or something. And I want to say that I respect that and I appreciate that. And I want to say that I have seen enough video footage out there of people that can recreate those images, literally recreate them. And once they do a couple of tests, they're able to, without a shadow of a doubt, prove that they're just lens anomalies, lens reflections. It's a lot of times, guys, and here's the deal too. People like, hey, look, man, I got this welding lens and I put this welding lens over it, and look, there's Planet X. It's right there. Well, you can move that welding lens around, or that lens that's in front of the camera, and guess what? It's going to start moving around that, Planet X or that Nibiru. So once again, I respect your opinions. I'm telling you, though, if you watch this footage, you'll be like, oh my gosh, because some of the best video footage that I've ever seen, that I thought without a shadow of a doubt, I was like, you know what? That looks like a planet. That looks like it could be Planet X. That could be it. I'm just like, this is incredible. There's a really good video done showing exactly how to replicate that as many times as you want. And there's a couple of small things you can do to eliminate that. So, that's out of respect to you guys. You can call me a shill. You can call me a troll. You can call me whatever you want. I'm doing that out of, that will save you a lot of time in the future if you just spend a little bit of time watching a couple of videos that show that.
During certain atmosphere conditions, you have anomalies in the sky, but this is not going to be an anomaly. You'll be able to see it every day when it shows up, every day, and anywhere on Earth, all the time. This is not going to be, oh, today it's there and tomorrow it's gone. It's not going to happen. And if it does show up, because there's 2 to 3 million amateur astronomers that they cannot stop, they'd be more than eager to zoom in and give you a great detailed shot of it that shows you it's a planet you've never seen before, that's not recognized of the known planets. When that happens, now you know you have something. It's not there. If it would be, this Earth would be shaking so bad, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
And also, I've heard the theory of, and I've looked into this too, and there might be possible ways to block out certain parts of the atmosphere to where an amateur astronomer like myself, that's got a decent scope. The thing, you can see the rings of Saturn. It does pretty good. I can stare at the sun with my sun filter and see the anomalies from the sun and the eruptions and stuff. But here's what I don't understand. If, for those of you that use the hypothesis, and once again, this is out of respect, you guys, just think about this while we're talking about it. You can come up to your own conclusions. How would they block out just that planet? Like, okay, they can make that thing, they can cloak that planet, but the moon, you can see the moon. Oh no, but the moon is just a projection as well. The moon is a projection, and they're cloaking that planet. Now, I love a good conspiracy. I really do love a good conspiracy. Look at the moon. If the moon affects the tides the way that they say it does, what would a planet of that mass do if it was in that proximity where you could see it like you can? I'm just asking questions, but I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Actually, the moon is not what's causing our tides.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, gravity is too weak now with the new models of the physicists. If you draw a Fibonacci spiral from the sun going through the Earth and follow it to it hits the moon. That's exactly the measure that where the tides are and the moon. That's exactly the same distance that it's off at. The moon and the tides are not misaligned. Remember, gravity goes at the speed of light. Well, pretty much they should be the same. They say, oh, that's a delay. Well, then why is it matching the plasma spiral from the sun? It's just like the wings of a hurricane, the winds or spirals out. Well, you take that same spiral, Fibonacci, and go, that's exactly the distance apart between the tides and the moon. It's the same mechanism that's causing the moon to go around, the same mechanism causing Earth to spin, and the same mechanism that's causing our tides. It's the solar winds giving a tap every so often, with just like a gale force wind comes around, boom, it taps it, and it makes its loop around. Because I find a better lineup with that. So I'm not, because part of our books have to be rewritten, but it'll take 50 years before it is rewritten. We don't have 50 years. We don't even have 5 years. It's going to be, it's going to probably happen between that time.
So, okay. And do you feel that Revelation 12, 1 and 2 was fulfilled?
Yes. It says one is chosen. It's kind of like elected. And he's going to make war with the seed of Jacob, basically. Bin Laden was chosen by the mullahs to do a holy jihad against the world. Okay, and did I say who I said? It Bin Laden, I meant. Okay, I might have used the wrong name there. I'm not quite sure. But he was chosen by the mullahs. He was voted in, and then they asked him, "Would you do this?" He said yes. Okay, so before he can declare war, he had to give a paper to Bush saying, switch to Islam, tell the West to switch to Islam, and there'll be no war, but if you don't, then we declare war against you. And that was started roughly around March and April. The Islamic calendar starts around the same time as the Hebrew calendar does. 6 months later is 9/11. They attacked. Yes, I believe the government allowed them to attack for certain reasons, but yeah, but it was still them attacking. And and then that's 2. Peace is taken from the earth. Now we're waiting for CO3. Remember, we were told that this has all happened within 7 years. That 3.5 is tribulation. That's not true. Go read the story of Jacob. You go read because this is the time of Jacob's trouble. Go read the story of Jacob, and you'll see the maximum time listed in Jacob was 20 years. He married. He worked for his first wife for 7 years. Then he was tricked. He knew nothing about her. Remember, he had to leave because Esau was going to make war against him. He left. That was during a Sabbath year, a Jubilee year probably, or Sabbath, one or two. And it was a Sabbath year, and he left. He went to his future father-in-law's place. He worked 7 years for a woman that he was tricked. He knew nothing about. Well, we were tricked. We got a world leader that we knew nothing about. He's a closet Muslim. And he financed the Muslim Brotherhood. And he overthrew about 3 to 4 countries with the Muslim Brotherhood. That started ISIS and everything. Now we have to wait 7 years. Now we got a world leader that's claiming to drain the swamp. That's exactly what we wanted the first time. Right after that is a Jubilee, because Jacob worked for his father-in-law for free. That defines when the Jubilee was. Now he's gathering, he struck a deal with his father-in-law that the spotted sheep would be his payment. Spotted sheep and spotted goats. Now he's collecting the spotted sheep and spotted goats because we're no longer white. We've walked away from his laws. We're spotted. And he's gathering the spotted sheep now and goats. For how long? Well, from the beginning, the time he started, when he went to his father-in-law, because when he went to leave with all of his pay and everything, his father-in-law chased him down to try to bring him back. And Jacob said, I worked for you for 20 years. And then when he reached the Jordan River, he split his family. Jacob split his family. He put a favorite and a remnant off to the side in a place of safety. The rest went on to face Esau head on, either for peace or to make war, whichever way that Esau wanted. This is exactly the same way it's going to happen again. A remnant, the church will be divided. A small group will go into the wilderness. A larger group will go and head straight on to Esau. And Esau will make war with him. And that's 20 years right there at the river Jordan. So when is 20 years from 2021? That lands in either 2020 or 2021. Depends on which way you want. I think it's 2021, March, April. This is a mirror image of Jacob's trouble, is the story of Jacob. Know your Bible. Only an Almighty can mirror something written over 3,000 years ago to something that mirrors it today.
Here's another good question for you, Gill, and thank you for answering that. There's so much right now in the alternative communities where people feel that we live, and a lot of people believe this because of their translations of prophecy in the Bible, their translation of it, that we live on a flat earth, that there is a firmament around the earth. And could you debunk that in a relatively short amount of time to give somebody something that they would need as evidence that we don't live on a flat earth underneath a dome like the what was that TV series that just came out a couple years ago called Under the Dome, from a Stephen King novel, where these people wake up one day and they're literally underneath a dome and they all start freaking out.
Right, I saw it. Yeah.
You saw that? Okay, the first 2 seasons were good. Season 3, I was like, man, you guys should have quit at the end of season 2. Just say it.
Well, one of the things is some groups of Islam teaches that it's a flat earth. And keep in mind, the vocabulary of the ancients was totally different than today. It was a lot smaller. If you were to see their dictionary back then, it was one fraction of what we have today. But it's just like if you're using cardinal points, like from the 4 corners, doesn't necessarily mean you're talking about a flat earth when you say that. You're talking about the cardinal points. It could be on a globe, okay? Now, how do we prove that? Well, go on Skype and make a friend in Australia. Take a picture of the moon at the same time you're taking yours in the northern part of the globe, okay? And you see exactly as if one's standing on his head, all right? And if the moon, if the earth was flat, for an eclipse, we see a little sliver going across the moon. You wouldn't see a round shape going across the moon on an eclipse. Most of these things that they show you on videos, they're leaving a part of it out for it to prove that it's a circular earth. I've showed 4 or 5 examples to other people that sent me things. Well, how do you talk about that? And I'd go through the science. Most of the time, sometimes it's faked. They'll shoot across water from a different point than what they're actually saying it's at. And then again, they say, well, you can see all of Chicago. No, you're only seeing the top 2/3 of it. The lower third, you're missing. which is exactly the height of what you'd miss from a certain location across the water. It's junk science. You get part of it right, but no one's willing to do the math, or they're lacking the knowledge to better do the math to get it correct. Flat Earth is not true.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that they could be doing that to hide something more like the possibility of I don't want to say hollow Earth, but a chambered Earth? There's a lot of research on that possibility as well. And I've actually been doing some research into that lately. And I think that there would be a lot more plausibility with that hypothesis versus the flat Earth hypothesis. And that might explain why a lot of the pictures that we do see, they don't show us certain images.
Well, I don't have any data to confirm or make a statement on that.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate that. That's, hey, perfect. All right. So then this question is from James, and thank you for answering that, Gill. The Jade Helm drills that we've been seeing, the FEMA gun controls, the Agenda 21, these fires that seem to be even possibly directed energy weapon type technologies and such. What does this all have to do with Revelation? Are you seeing this as signs in the prophecies as well?
Yes, it says we will go through tribulation. Tribulation started in 2001. Esau declared war against Jews and Christians. And you're going to see nature in itself, just like earthquake, and you're going to see super hurricanes. I read papers over 10 years back where there used to be a couple islands off the coast of New York City that was documented 200-300 years back, or 200 years back or whatever, that there was islands there or something, and those islands are gone. And when they come to find out, the geologists went in there and the weather people, they were destroyed by super hurricanes. And that was roughly the time period of when this planet passed. I personally believe that we may see some super hurricanes coming, and you don't want to be anywhere near these creatures. That would be ungodly, because grass won't stay in the ground when these things come around. It wiped off not just the homes that were on the island, but the entire island was gone off the coast of New York. So will we see extraordinary things? Yes. We haven't seen the worst yet. And that's why I'm saying our planet is not here yet. If it would be, I would have no problem telling you so. But I don't believe we'd have the internet up, because they would have to keep law and order, and they would stop amateur astronomers. When you see the internet going down, start looking at Sagittarius. That's why I'm giving you this information: where to look, what to look for, and how big is it going to be. Look here on this chart that I have up. Are you able to see this? Okay, look,
Yeah.
right here. At 7 days away, it will only be about 50% of the diameter of the moon. At 7 days away. If it's 2 days away, it'll be roughly 3.4 times the diameter of the moon. And when it gets even with us, it'll be probably roughly about anywhere from 50 to 80 times the diameter of the moon, depending on how close it comes to us. All right? But before that, when it rounds the sun, guess what? It looks like a star or a comet. Not that big. It's not going to be visibly frightening, not until it gets to about 7th day away. Maybe the last 2 weeks, if you know what you're looking at, you get frightened. But before that, even before it's coming out of Sagittarius, it's only going to look like a star. Before it looks like a comet. It will not be frightening. Use logic, because the software tells us what is the visual effects of it. We can go to the software with a model, say what type of arc second or arc minutes wide is it visually. Okay, and then I can do the calculation. I'll tell you if it's a third of the moon, a half of the moon, or whatever. It's not going to be frightening, not until it gets within the last 2 weeks of this thing. When they give the 40-day warning, most people continue to go around marrying and celebrating and doing what they normally do. They will not take it as it's time to get some food and take shelter. The Bible even tells you that. The Bible is alluding to a short notice. It says the wicked and adulterous world, and the word wicked does not mean evil. Word wicked in the original meaning in the Hebrew meant one who's blending man's laws with his laws, and one who's blending, that's taking things out, taking or adding away. That's what wicked means of that period in time. Today we think wicked is synonymous with evil. It's not. For a wicked and adulterous generation, there will be only one warning. That's the sign of Jonah, and I believe is going to be the 40-day warning. The first one, the 3 days and 3 nights, was the first time the Messiah came. The second one is pertaining to the second time he comes. There's only 2 pages to Jonah. Only 2 pages. Remember the Nineveh disk? It proves that the planet was there in the exact model. This overlay right here, the entry and exit coming out in Passover, is the same model in all of these plans. You can't do that. They didn't know orbital mechanics. They can't concoct a story that follows something that accurate multiple times. 300 years apart, they didn't even know each other. How can they consistently lie about something they had no knowledge of the science even? Can't do it. The Bible gives us the answers. You have to understand what it's talking about to know what the future is bringing here and what he's talking about. It's there. This object is real. We got scientific papers to prove that. It's just this. We have the smoke. We have the heat of a fire. But we can't see the flames. So is there a forest fire or not? If you see the smoke and you feel the heat, well, we got perturbations. It's moving our planets around. All right. We got the effects on Earth. That's the smoke. We just can't see it yet, which is the flames. But I can tell you right now, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Absolutely.
And we have an object, and it's close.
It takes 16 years. There's fire.
It takes 16 years to reach the sun when it reaches Neptune's orbit. Well, guess what? 2021 is not 16 years away. According to the model right now, it should be just outside Saturn's orbit. If it remember, I can't predict the future. I'm saying there's a time period. If it goes beyond 2024, that generation that saw Israel born would be 90 years old. That would break the prophecy. It has to happen before that, and that includes the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. They also see that. So do the math and get concerned. You have to be a watchman on the wall, not a prophet on the wall. Be alert, know what to look for, and pay attention. Because you won't have me telling you it's here probably, because the internet will be down. You're going to have to use your own knowledge of where to look and what you're seeing. But I can tell you right now, there's no valid pictures in the public realm right now of this planet. Because I'd show you close-up views of it from my telescope, if it would be. So should 2 to 3 million other amateur astronomers. And just because the internet is up is a fact that it's not here yet in itself.
Is it a planet or a binary star?
I don't think it's a star. But remember how they say Jupiter didn't have enough mass to become a star? I think we'd have to rewrite our books now on what we know about the universe as being electromagnetic root and the way. I don't think we have the correct model on what a star is done. is created. I don't think planets can be a star. I think they have a totally different mechanism. So that's my own opinion. So can they call it a dwarf? Yeah, they could call it. Would it be correct is what I'm trying to state. I don't think it would be correct. I think it's a planet / comet that was described by Ferreira in South astronomer in South. He had the best description of it. He didn't have the data that I'm presenting. If he did, he would come to the same conclusions, that it's a 360-year orbit. You know, this is data that Harrington didn't have, this Derek Ferraro didn't have. Without this data, we would not link this to the biblical records. And it's listed 14 times in the biblical records, if you know what you're looking at. They didn't have word planet. They didn't have word comet. You know, you got to look at the conditions. Fiery hail, 7 years drought, earthquake. When they say the whole earth shook, they knew the whole earth shook. You know why? Shipping. Ships from different ports would report in. Yeah, we had an earthquake on that such and such day. Then they could make the comment, the whole earth shook. The world shook. Their known world shook. Earthquakes in Egypt doesn't shake Italy. And so on around the regions. When they all shook, that meant the whole world shook. And that's a fact. That would not be an exaggeration. Because when this planet comes around, this whole earth will shake. And much more than that.
You know, so that answers one of the questions that somebody asked about being next to the coast. Probably not the safest place to be, folks.
The Bible says nowhere do not live anywhere on the coastline on earth during this event. The Bible already warned you of that. And the next, if I start to see a global drought in the next year and a half, you know, that it's progressing, in the next year and a half, then I will move away from the coastline. I will move away from it. And I won't go to the mountaintop. A mountain tells you that it's the weak point in the crust. That's why mountains were formed. I see so many people are moving to the mountains. I say, why? Why are you moving to a dangerous spot? Mountains were formed during this, and it came around. It's a weak point in the crust. You need a good, clear valley that's high enough from elevation where water won't, but it won't be anywhere on this side of the earth. This half of the earth will be hit.
Wow. Well, I got to say, Gill, every time you come on this show, I mean, you certainly get my mind going at a Googleplexian times trillion miles an hour there. The synapses are just going all over the place. I really appreciate it. And the audience does as well. I mean, the amount of people that listen throughout the program, just nothing but accolades, a lot of good things to say, a lot of great questions. So I'd really like to thank you again for coming on the show.
All I ask is for the people to go back and read their scripture and look at the graphics I put and go back and read those points and use your mind clearly. Open your mind up to this. Let the Almighty open your eyes. I can't open them. Pray for him to open them. And you will see that these are not vain religious acts that he's telling you to rehearse. You know, there are practical reasons why he's saying these things. He's getting you prepared for a real event. That's why there is a God. There is him. Because he already told us what to do. And only someone outside of time can do that. I wish your audience luck, and I wish you luck. And may the Almighty bless the listeners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gill. It was an honor. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this edition of Leak Project. Make sure to check out Gill's website, planet7x.net. Also, go to leakproject.com. You'll get access to over 1,300 podcasts, downloadable ad-free, over 100 podcasts exclusive to leakproject.com. Make sure to check back on the channel daily. I do multiple live shows almost every single day. Be excellent to each other. Question everything. Be the change. you want to see.